I'm Mike Wondolowski, president of Carpinteria Valley Association. This organization works to maintain Carpinteria as a small beach town and to preserve and enhance the rural beauty of the valley. A really important part of that goal is Carpinteria's open spaces, both large and small, and both natural, like Carpinteria Bluffs and the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, and developed open spaces like sports fields, playgrounds, trails, even small greenbelt parks, and in some way agriculture. I'm talking today with Matt Roberts, who's played a significant role in multiple parts of this topic over the course of many years. I'll let him share how many years that is. So, Matt, I'm glad we're able to have you here today to discuss this really important and fascinating topic.
Well, thanks, Mike, for having me. And I think this is a great project you guys are working on. There are a lot of stories. I have known so many folks who are no longer with us, and how I regret not asking them more questions before they left us. Although my health is fine, I'm not leaving.
We don't need to accelerate this interview. We can get it done here.
We don't have to hurry. We're good.
That's good to hear. So let me start with asking you first to provide a little background on your personal history here in Carpinteria, and maybe including your family's history here before you were on the scene.
Well, that's a great question, and it has a lot to do with my motivation on what I did as a career for the city of Carpinteria. I always felt a little bit of pride in wanting to make the ancestors of my family proud of what I did, in a legacy sense. The It was my mother's grandfather who came in about 1870 to Carpinteria, and my mother's father was born, I think, in the late 1800s. So I think 1880, and she was born here in Carpinteria. I was born in Los Angeles, however, but we came and visited the family all the time, and so we were up here. In fact, always came to the beach for summer vacation and visited with my aunt and my uncle and their families. Um, and Because the family's been here so long, I have a piece of agricultural property that I manage today, which is all open field agriculture. And I do believe one of the beautiful things about Carpinteria and Santa Barbara County, when you come through Ventura and enter from the eastern entrance to the county, is that open field agriculture and how beautiful it is and how it sets a different tone than the heavily urbanized areas of Los Angeles and Ventura counties. But I started in 1980 for the city of Carpinteria. Actually, I was a contractor providing ocean beach services, and carried that on until about 1987, when the city hired me internally to be an employee to run the beach. And I parlayed that into being hired as their Parks and Rec director in 1997, and was involved with myriad projects all the way until I retired at about 2022. So a long
It's been
time.
3 years since you retired?
What did I do? Retire in 23, maybe.
Yeah, well, 2 or 3 years still seems like it was just yesterday.
One doesn't need to watch the calendar so carefully when you're retired.
So, and you're still actively growing things, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Still working. In fact, I'm turning and have the ability to turn more attention to the ranch, and
So,
that's a lot
so
of fun.
not an odd thing, but one thing I'm curious before we really get into the open space is your degree, I believe, is in business economics.
That's correct.
Is that an obvious starting point for a farmer?
Well, it isn't necessarily an obvious starting point for a farmer, but it is a great degree, and it has a lot of spectrum to it. So there is a lot of accounting, and that involves even uh, tax accounting and just bookkeeping, and some specialty style accounting classes, if you will. There's a big curriculum in law, business law, and tort
Mm.
law, and that's a great foundation to have. And then, of course, there's the whole economic portion of it, which uh, learn a lot about not only macroeconomics but price theory and microeconomics, things that make an urban economic engine run.
Okay,
So
interesting.
it's a great. It gives you a lot of perspective and a lot of tools to go into almost anything.
Fascinating. When I think about it, I have an uncle who had a degree in economics, and he became a dairy farmer, and he was a successful dairy farmer, doing things a little bit differently through his life than they had always been done. He said, "Look at the business case. Don't
Yeah,
just
and
do what
there's
your
always
daddy did."
yeah, and there's always agricultural in the family. My uncle Al Thurman was here in Carpinteria, and he was one that was involved in bringing in the lake water, Lake Kachuma water into the valley.
Mm,
Certainly supported that as a farmer because that in those days was an important water supply for agriculture. Because
yeah,
that was the thinking. You know, agriculture was the economic engine here. All the big warehouses down by the railroad tracks, they all served agriculture. Um,
right.
the town used to have agricultural services. In fact, right across the tracks used to be orchard services, where a company, I think it was the McNeil family, and they ran a orchard care and upkeep company. Or there's two sons, I think. Well, I can't remember their names, Chris and doggone it. But and boy, we had three welders and Western
Mm,
Auto and four auto parts stores, and you know, just a
right.
different mix of retail.
Right. Interesting.
Also,
Yeah, that makes total sense. You see that when you go through some of the towns along Highway 101, the Salinas Valley, where they're obviously almost 100% agricultural serving and visitor serving.
yeah, and so we had you know, farming in the family. My aunt Lua, my mom's older sister, she would always have us up, and she had lemons mostly in those days. But going back to the '50s, she did have avocados, and so we always knew it, always was familiar with it, always helped out a little bit, knew the ropes.
Interesting. Okay. So with that kind of foundation, I'll throw you a kind of a big question to start off here about open space. I want to focus on open space today. And so I guess let me ask you, what is the value uh, of open spaces, both natural and developed in Carpinteria? Why are they valuable, and why is it important for the taxpayers of the city to spend money on them?
Oh, there is this is going
And
to
we
take
only have an hour.
this is going to take all day. There's nothing more important, actually, to the identity of the town. You know, we all are. We all have to keep our connection to nature. And in my career, one of the very first projects I worked on was the Salt Marsh Nature Park, and I watched other people wiser than myself uh, champion that project. I heard their arguments, and they sunk in with me and were very, very formative for me. Wayne Farron has a amphitheater named after him in the park. He was an amazing presence when it came to advocating for the protection of the marsh. And I learned that uh, through him, partially, that when you are advocating for something, you need the best content in your argument you can get, but you do need also to have volume. You got to say it loudly, and you got to say it clearly. And no one was better than him at doing that. But you know, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I watched all of the open space around get developed with urban uses, and it changed the character entirely. In fact, the identity of a community, La Cañada, where I grew up, was there was no boundaries anymore. We had a wash, I think Devil's Gate Dam, that it was a physical area they could not develop because of a flood area, but it just becomes a sheet of urbanity, and the boundaries are only
A sheet of urbanity. That is the quote of the day.
and the boundaries of your town are only defined by the road sign that says "Welcome to." And Carpinteria has a chance not to have that happen to us, and we have these natural barriers like the marsh to the west, and what could have been developed, the bluffs and the coastal open space to the east, and of course the north, the mountains that protects us as well, and the ocean to the south. So here we have these natural boundaries, and we need to celebrate those, and we need to embrace them. And why should we pay tax dollars for them? Well, you know, certainly every community has parks. And in fact, my favorite mantra, one of the things that used to motivate me is I used to think, should I pursue this park when I'm working as a parks director? Was we don't think of it as we have parks in our community, but think of it as we have a community in our park, because all of Carpinteria should be thought of as one connected park through its trails, through its open spaces. And this is where you can learn about nature. This is where you can have spiritual experiences. You can relax. You can get de-stressed. It has health benefits. Now, the city of Carpinteria doesn't pay for medical services. We have no health. You know, employees get health insurance, but you know what I'm saying. But yet, the community at large, the overall community benefit, is a tremendous health benefit that saves a lot of medical costs. It's not articulated in the city's budget, but it's out there somewhere. And just sanity. Uh, you know, we honk at each other when we pass with a car and maybe curse each other, because I know that guy ahead of me, when he drives slow, he's an idiot. When he drives too fast, he's a maniac, right? George Carlin. But when we walk on a trail, we say hello, we wave, and we see each other, and it creates a community. And parks do that. You know, you see your neighbor in the parks, or you see your neighbors on the trail, um, um, and it parks also bring a big, huge value in property values. It's been documented so many times that a house across the street from an open park is worth more than one that's buried in a suburb.
Sure.
And
Okay.
it brings tourism, and
Yeah.
tourism is the economic engine that Carpenter really needs to understand how important that is. You know, our economy is shifting. It is shifting away from agriculture and the services and the retail mix that that has, and with the issues of the internet taking away a lot of retail sales, only those experiential things like restaurants and bars and hopefully not tattoo parlors and tobacco shops. But those are the kind of things that you buy now in your retail sector. And uh, big oil in Carpinteria was a huge presence, and it was a big part of the economy.
Mhm.
I don't know if people realize this, but back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was a huge royalty that the city used to get, among other coastal cities, from the oil production offshore. And that dried up. Carpinteria is lucky that we still have a pier that Chevron leases, but that'll go away someday. And that's a lot of money that the city will need to find a way to replace. But the other benefit of big oil was actually consider the Carpinteria Bluffs that was acquired in about the year 2000. One of the most profound things that could ever happen to Carpinteria. That is a legacy that will be there forever. And the Rincon Bluffs and any other open space out there that can be acquired publicly, that will help define this community. It'll make property values good. It'll keep our tourism engine running. And it was partially only possible because big oil was here and wasn't interested in developing it in the 60s and 70s and 80s. They were more interested in their oil business. Um, so I think if that was not owned by big oil, it probably would have been developed a long time ago.
Mm. So, okay. So parks are important. They're worth paying for. And again, parks being all open spaces. Um, Let me ask you to talk about agriculture and the ways that the benefits that agriculture have as open space, as private open space, and how does that benefit a community?
Well,
And when I say agriculture, you and I know each other. I mean open field agriculture. I consider greenhouses an industrial use, even though it happens to be on land zoned agriculture. So,
they have
open
a
field
very
agriculture, how is that open space and how's that help?
yeah. They don't add to our aesthetic values, do they much? But, well, you know, it is important, and uh, there are the benefits such as carbon sequestration and the benefit of plants that have just in the natural environment. Um, the green growing live plants do have an environmental benefit. I think that one of the things most people see though is just especially in the hillside agriculture, is the visual beauty. And I recently had an opportunity to reclassify my property and enrolled under a program known as the Farm Security Act, which protects it and keeps it in ag for it's a rolling horizon of 20 years out. And one of the attributes to be a Farm Security Act property is um, you have to you have to contribute to the visual beauty.
Hmm.
You have to have unique farmland as defined by the state. You have to be in production to a certain level, so on and so forth. But one of the boxes I was able to check was, yeah, visual beauty. Look up in the hills and you see a nice avocado orchard. It's green, it's lush, and I think it is beautiful. So, in fact, I reminds me of a conversation I had with a guy down on the beach one day who had moved into one of the beachfront condos, and he was from Orange County. And he looked at me and he said, "Matt, look at the hills behind you. There's so much potential for development." And I was kind of frightened. But we're facing that now with the
Yeah.
relaxation of the housing regulations. Someone told me there was a high rise that was being proposed in Carpinteria that was even as high as 18 stories.
Oh, geez.
Now, I don't
Yeah.
know if we get anywhere, but people are thinking that the doors are wide open for whatever kind of residential development they want, even though it may completely change the character of our town.
Yeah. And right there, I mean, a benefit of having healthy, productive, economically viable agriculture where it is now is that helps maintain our stable urban rural boundary, which is one of the uh, tools to prevent the sprawl up the foothills up to the crest of the mountains.
Yeah, there's no doubt that the value, if you could turn it into high density housing, is going to be a greater land value. But I don't think that's the point.
Yep.
There's community wide. There's a lot of benefits. We need food security. Um, I think locally grown food is better, more nutritious. I think it just tastes better. I've never found an avocado that tastes better than a Carpinteria avocado anywhere. And so there's a lot of attributes, but the marketplace has to differentiate. It's really not easy to compete with Peru. They have high transportation costs, but their labor costs, their regulatory expenses aren't anywhere near what ours are.
Yeah.
Our advantage is we're close to the market, but it's right now the Mexican, Peruvian, Colombian avocados are pouring in.
Yep. Um, and then, I mean, I'd say that the another area that is sort of implicit in our agriculture is the fire mitigation, the wildfire protection. And that we saw that during the Thomas fire, that the fires burned up to the edge of some of the avocado groves, singed a few trees on the edge, but the green irrigated avocados and open and row crops were were untouched. And thankfully, our residential areas were untouched by the fire.
Yeah, no, absolutely correct. It may not stop a fire, but it slows it way down. There's no comparison to the dry chaparral versus an irrigated orchard.
And then you've got the developed parks, the playing fields at El Caro, which are on that boundary. Which I mean, I personally went out there, took some pictures of the fire and standing in front of the of Girls Inc. and being happy I had a nice big green field behind me.
Yeah, and even when we developed the viola fields out on the bluffs, that was part of the promise. If we acquire this, we can get some more sports fields out there. Uh, we took a look at that design and found that it was a very good emergency response site for air operations, and in fact, it has been used several times
Yep,
for helicopter air operations. They like coming in over the blue water, being able to land and go. So another community benefit that most people don't think about much.
exactly. So, uh, excuse me, you mentioned the your tenure in this town, and a lot of things have changed. But what are some of the ways you've seen Carpinteria change, and specifically, how have those changes affected our need for open spaces?
Well, what's amazing about Carpinterians, and I suppose this is across the world, but everybody's very passionate about being here. And it's that drive that led to the preservation of the Carpinteria Bluffs. I was a little bit daunted when it finally came down to, I think it was Shea Vickers Homes, and the representative for that company was here, and he said, "Well, if you guys don't want it to be developed, then buy it." And they came up with a $4 million price, and I thought, "Oh boy."
Don't exaggerate. It was only 3.95 million.
I round up just so but yeah, with escrow fees and a couple no closing costs. But the point being is that I thought, boy, 4 million. How are we ever going to come up with that? And it happened pretty fast. It also was a really good motivator for future acquisitions. People said, "Hey, we can do this." And your question was about why should we continue to do this, or what?
How have the changes in Carpinteria affected the need for open spaces? As the town grew, we built houses on some of our ag, on some of our open spaces. Um, and then particularly inside the city limit, you worked hard to create some of the smaller parks, the Carpinteria Creek Park and things like that.
Mhm. Well, yeah, I was always trying to put more parks, especially where they were needed. I tried to rehab the parks that the city had. When I started, Monte Vista Park was a big grass field with the grass came up to the curb. Now we have a little forest out there with a restroom and nice barbecue areas. And I think they got, I drew the concept of a dog park out there. I think that went in after I left. But uh, the town has been urbanized. I remember when Casitas Plaza was a orchard, and Shepherd's Place was an orchard, and the freeway was a two-lane highway. I was a little boy, but these things are not lost on me when they got put through. So the demand for residents have been crowding out the agricultural rural feel. And so clawing onto that and getting as much as we can in the public sector and protecting it forever is going to be a legacy and so profound. Um, it will be, newcomers to this community get to inherit an incredible resource. and that's why they're coming. Um, I always thought that people would say, well, the price of housing needs to come down. I think that's a noble thought, but really, as the economist in me says, well, the only way that price will fall is if the quality of life gets so bad that nobody wants to be here,
Yep.
and I don't see that happening anytime soon. So yes, when I was Parks Director, we did work to develop a park acquisition and open space acquisition development impact fee. I think it's important for those fees to be, continue to be pursued. New development pays into an open space fund that may not be enough to buy property, but it's enough to research it and do the proper background checks on it. We usually do a environmental hazard examination of these properties, and then have the money to back up the matching on a state grant or a federal grant to buy it, or to inspire the local private donations.
And that's an interesting point that it's kind of subtle and wonky, but I find it really important that the development impact fees, the state law requires that these fees be based on the real need of the community, and that new development increases the need for new parks. And so basically, the fact we have that fee says that the law recognizes the need for parks and open space in a community. It's not just our opinion. It truly is recognized as an important part of a community.
And some of the greatest politicians in our day are famous for their support of parks and recreation. I mean, those things are not second afterthoughts. At least they should never be. And
Yeah.
yeah, it goes back to Teddy Roosevelt, who helped protect national parks.
Yep.
And I
Yep.
don't forget the story about Yosemite, where they it was a state park. It was in the California state hands, and California started coming up with ideas to put condominiums and housing and other things within that park, and the federal government snatched it back and said, "No, we're not going to allow that to happen to this place." Um, so I think those perspectives may be reversed now, but you never know.
As is should be anticipated in any political decision, that nothing is permanent until ownership is locked down.
Well, and you bring up a great point there. I like it a lot because this is what the partnership with the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County does. They, with the Rincon Bluffs Preserve and the Carpinteria Bluffs Preserve, they have a ownership of the conservation values out there. So the city council cannot go and develop those lands, change their mind. New council can't get elected and do something different because the land trust is there to say, no, we own all those rights. You guys have the fee title, Mr. Carpinteria, but we, the land trust, have the rights on the conservation. So it'll help protect that really in perpetuity, and it's a great way to go.
And that's a really interesting point, that different entities in the community are involved in different ways with respect to open space protection, acquisition, management. The city, as we've talked about, has had a significant role with you leading the charge from the staff position. In the Carpinteria Valley, the county has had almost no role. I would argue that could be debated, but let's just say far less a role than the city. Um, and then nonprofits such as the Land Trust for Santa Barbara County has played a significant role. And then there's individuals and local nonprofits. Um, can you talk a little more about the different roles the different entities and different people play with respect to, Carpinteria Bluffs is kind of the poster child, but there's smaller parks and smaller open spaces too.
Well, it's important to have a park within walking distance of any house. I mean, in my opinion, and the higher the density, the housing, the more parks they need, the more open space they
Mhm.
have. I think the folks that have condominiums out on Baylord, out there by Monte Vista Park, um, they feel special because they're so close to the Carpinteria Bluffs. Some of them think that hey, that's there for them, and it is. It absolutely is. They don't have their own yard. I think the one development that's kind of west of Baylor out there, there's no fenced yards in those condos. Everybody has open space. So in terms of having a private backyard or your little private open space for your kids can play, they rely entirely on the parks. And that's why that Monte Vista Park barbecue program out there is so popular, because this is where they all have their weekend family barbecues. It's almost an insatiable demand for that out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's important to have parks within walking distance of just about every residence and a trail to connect them. It was my kind of a big disappointment that the Rincon Trail got stalled because again, this is a way to think outside the automobile, to think with
Hmm.
bikes and walking. Um, I've been traveling with my wife a bunch, and we find ourselves doing 5 or 6 or 7 miles a day, and it's just because we can't not. We'll even say we're not going to go very far. We're too tired, and then find ourselves 8 miles away from our hotel. But it's yeah, so it's just your nature to go explore, and the bigger and broader our trail system is, the more we'll encourage people to get out of the car and get healthy.
Absolutely. I mean, the connectivity aspect of trails and routes, I'll call it. They might be along a road because that's where it's accessible, but it's not just a gutter or a sidewalk on the road. It's a safe, fun route. That's one role. And then of course there's things like the Franklin Trail, which isn't well, it is a route to get somewhere. I love Sutton Creek. It's a great place to go for a picnic, even though it's a couple miles away. But the Franklin Trail, it is really fun to see the diversity of the people who use it, which in my experience is significantly different from the usage of trails in Montecito and Santa Barbara, where there's an incredible trail network. We have our Franklin Trail, which is our sole trail up into the foothills in this specific area, and it looks like the whole community up on that trail.
Yeah, that's neat, and it's yeah, you're right. It's the only access that is back to the Los Padres National Forest from Carpinteria, and it had a long history with Rancho Monte Alegre and getting access. And I think there was a really bad court decision back, it might have been in the 80s, where a judge said, okay, the public can open the trail, but they have to fence it on both sides so there can be no trespass onto the private property. And a lot of us thought that's ridiculous. When does the I mean, if a private property wants to fence their property, they should be able to fence their property. But when is the roadway required to do it, or the trail? But I will put a little landmark moment that not many people know exists. The trail planner for the county of Santa Barbara was Claude Garcia Soleil for
Mhm.
the longest time. Really, he was the county trails guy. And it turned out, with my long, deep roots in Carpinteria, one of the families that were had property that needed to have an easement across it to get through the Franklin Trail were Glenn and Bill Horton, and they so happened to be related, and and knew my mother much more than they knew me. But I went up to Glenna and Bill Horton's kitchen with Claude, and we sat down there and we talked about opening up, and they made the decision right in front of us, right there. Yeah, I think we will grant the trail easement. And I remember that was, oh, this is big. This is really big. And Claude took care of all the work because it was a county project, not a city project. But today, this trail is now never going to go away. It's established, and it's a great asset to the community.
It really is. It really is. And again, the whole community does use it, and it's so much fun to see that. Um, so uh, when you think about you made a great comment that every house should have a park within, close walking distance, not your 6 to 8 miles away walking distance.
Right.
Um, and in many cases, that park is a school. Um, and so, how does the open space in schools fit into the needs of a community, outside of school hours?
Well, you're referring to the athletics or the exercise or just the open air.
The open air, the lawns in back, or even at Aliso School, they have that track now.
Oh, right. I know they put that track in. I was involved with the middle school athletic facilities. In fact, um, when I think there was the first bond measure. I don't remember what it was called. It's still on our property tax bills, but they redid I think put $10 million into the middle school rehab, and they ran out of money before they could get to the athletic facilities. And so we partnered with the school district, and I was able to get a grant from the state of California that was for urban athletic facilities for cities. And it was not something that was available to schools, but it was the community pool success, which is on school district property. And I was able to make an argument that we already have a city rec department on the campus running this pool. Now we want to run tennis courts, basketball courts, and a running track when it's not being used for school time. And that conjunctive use is the most economically solid public policy way to provide these services to the community. And those grant people came down and said, we've never done this before. We're going to do it for you because we like the partnership that you have with the school district, and we think it's going to work. And so those facilities are built; they're in service. I think the tennis courts um, are largely used now for pickleball.
As well. Yep.
There's tennis there, and I'll tell you a little story about that. The middle school always had tennis courts, and my mother went to that school and was a tennis champion back in the day. We're talking about in probably 1936 now. And she was still alive when I was doing that project. And I said, well, I'm going to see if we can't fit tennis courts back in there because it's a great spot for a set of courts. I don't think those tennis courts would be there if it wasn't for my mother winning in 1936.
Welcome to a small town.
I was doing her bidding. But anyway, all the school facilities are really important part of that open space and part of child development. Let's not forget the idea of all the playgrounds. Are they there just for fun? No, a lot of kids are learning a lot about wrist. They're learning a lot about hand, motor, eye coordination. They're learning a lot about physical strength and gaining it. All of those have real big social benefits that really aren't ever put down on a city's budget.
Yeah.
And I used to say that all the time. It's like, we can pave the street over and over and over again, but if we do this park project, it's going to have an incredible benefit. It's going to be a legacy.
And what's really hard is when something like that has that benefit, the alternative is, of course, not having that benefit. And there's real costs associated with an unhealthy population, a population that doesn't understand the outdoors, doesn't care for the outdoors, and doesn't protect the outdoors. And then you get in this downward death spiral of, yeah, we don't need parks. We don't need, the next generation says, I never used a park as a kid. There's too many worms out there.
They're delicious, by the way. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we can't understand the screen time generation as much. I know that when I was a kid, there was no such thing, and I'm sure are you 40 now, Mike? At least.
I was once.
Well, I still remember really vividly that on Saturday morning I'd watch the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show that ended at about 9:30, and that was when they changed to some other show I couldn't watch, and you couldn't watch it anytime you wanted. It wasn't on demand. If you missed
Right.
it, you missed it. And then I'd go out and I'd be gone all day outdoors, like doing whatever it was, riding my bike or exploring something. But there was no screen time, and that's just a different. I've got to believe it has an impact. Maybe good, maybe bad. I don't know, but on the way that these people.
It's a difference that we don't fully understand yet, the full implications.
But I do know. I still, I go out to the parks. One of the last playgrounds I did was at Monte Vista. I thought it came out really nice. And go out there and see parents and their kids, intergenerational, being there together. I see that it was like the TOML. One of my favorite things at the TOML Interpretive Play Area project was we put that life-size canoe down there, and it was fun to find sources for people who could make all that kind of one-off playground equipment. But there's two moms each having a Starbucks cup in their hand, and they're facing each other, and they were talking to each other. And I said, "Oh, that's a new carpentry phenomenon. It's a TOML talk." You take your best down in that boat, and you say, "Okay, we got to get this straightened out." Or the community garden. I think a really gratifying moment was not far after it opened, seeing a granddaughter, a mother, and a grandmother all at the same bed working at it. And it was one of the raised beds, which was sort of an innovation at the time. And I wanted to do those desktop height planting beds because one of the things you can get points on for that grant was accessibility.
Okay.
We all know what's ramps, curbs, gutter cuts, or we know accessibility is what the restroom looks like. We know accessibility is not having too many stairs. But I thought, well, what else can I do to make this accessible? And it was the raised garden beds.
Absolutely.
And there they were, and they were 3 generations doing something together in that park. And it's like, this park is working. This is great. These people are going to remember this forever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to go by there and see people working and interacting. It's another place, like you said, when people are, on a trail, just saying hello to people, but people who are working their plot at the garden, truly have something in common. And so you see them chatting, sometimes a little more than gardening, and that's a major success.
And it's not only intergenerational, but it's all walks of life are down there. All cultures are there.
Yep.
Everybody. I was also amazed in the diversity, and I don't just mean of the people. I mean of what people were growing. I have my own little rut in my own home garden, and I was going, "Wow, I've never even thought about growing that or that." Or really fascinating. And some huge successes. So um, we loved, and that park, as far as I know, is almost always oversubscribed. So
Mm.
great to expand
Yeah.
it a little bit.
Yeah, actually, you don't see any idle plots out there.
And it was neat. I remember David Griggs at the museum, and it was, I think it might have been him. I'm not certain, but I got a call and it said, "Boy, there's an old railroad shed down by Maple, and they're going to tear it down." And I think it was Kirk, Kirk Baker, who had a firewood company down there, and he used it as his office. But that was over, and they were going to tear this down for future development. And we decided we can move that shed. And I didn't know what we were going to save it for. I had to talk the city manager into even considering it because it was not looked on as something we should do. But we did manage to move it up to the city yard where it sat for a few years, and I had no idea what to use it for. But there it was. We preserved it. And then along came the community garden by the railroad tracks. And I thought, this is perfect. Put it back where it belongs by the railroad tracks. And you may not know this, but the railroad used to, Southern Pacific Railroad in the time used to build those up in Northern California out of redwood. And they would train them down and place them along the tracks all through their system.
Yeah, well, they had the transportation method, so that works.
So it's perfect. Well, that's one of those sheds. It was built elsewhere and brought in. And when we did a lot of renovation, we discovered something that helped us date it, which is it's got square nails,
Oh,
which means,
wow.
yeah, it means it's pre 1910 for the stuff that's old. We did obviously have to reinforce it and do some modern construction in there, but that was to me amazing. And I never did get around to putting the plaque on it. Definitely, maybe I'll do that on my own and go sneak it on there. But something that
That guerrilla historical preservation.
right, well, we need some of that in this town. You know, it's all good.
I'm still pondering the lack of a boundary between historical preservation and hoarding.
Yeah, well,
It's a fine line if it even exists.
yeah.
There was a shed. I didn't know what to do with it, so we held on to it for a couple years.
Well, it was a shame to see it go. You know,
Yeah.
and I think I probably at the time thought, well, maybe it can go into some park as an interpretive thing, or maybe we can make a public restroom out of it, or maybe something. But it was true. The shiplap siding is all redwood, all really interesting stuff.
Wow.
Obviously it had a fire inside it at one time in its life because when we got into it, we could see some charred wood and whatnot. But it's in pretty good shape now, and nobody even notices it now. It just belongs there.
It belongs there,
And we
and
put
that's the best kind of things. It's not a shiny thing standing out because it doesn't fit. It just flat out fits.
And I remember thinking all the time when we were building it, even the train conductors would ask, "What are you guys doing here? What are you building?" And as we built it, and I got to know a couple of those guys, they were like, "This is great," and it was all about this presence. People come by train to Carpinteria, and we want them to see something like this. This is a beautiful thing to, for a train traveler to see. And if you travel the train a little bit, like I do, you see a lot of backyard industrial stuff as you go through LA. A lot of really kind of unsavory things, and
Right.
when you hit Carpinteria, all of a sudden it's just gorgeous.
Yeah. It is funny. It's a um there was an event at Dick Weinberg's house a number of years ago, and there was a bunch of old time Carpinterians there, and I had only lived here at 20 years at the time, so I was one of the newbies. And train went by, and of course conversation stopped because it was right in his backyard. But all the old time Carpinterias turned and waved and smiled at people on the train, as opposed to just waiting and being annoyed by the noise. It's like, huh, that is Carpinteria, is just that friendliness. Like, oh, people on the train. Of course we're going to wave to them.
Yeah, neat. Well, no, it's good, and I think that train service is more valuable than people realize. um, In fact, I had some friends who came up recently, and they're out of Seattle. They came in and stayed in Carpinteria, and I said, "What are you going to do today?" He goes, "Oh, we're going to go to Santa Barbara." And I said, "Oh," he said, "Well, we're going to take the train." And they love the idea of being able to go up and walk State Street and get back on the train and come back. And I think it's $8 each way or something.
Right. About the
But
cost of gas, probably.
well, add parking, and yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's true. Um, so we've touched on a number of different types of the open space in town. We talked about the Carteret Bluffs Nature Preserve and the Rincon Bluffs Preserve. You mentioned Tamal Interpretive Play Area, which is a highly utilized playground. Which I'll interrupt myself here. That was an interesting partnership with Rotary, and continues to be the effort with Rotary, another city and private or nonprofit organization teaming together with a common goal. Um, we talked. We You mentioned the community garden, and we talked a little bit about the Coastal Vista Trail, um, and I mean, these are in Franklin Trail, a real diverse in Monte Vista Park, very diverse sampling of the different kinds of parks. And there's also some little places that we haven't really talked about, some little green belts that people probably don't even know they have names. There's Franklin Park. There's
Let me interrupt you on Franklin Park. That's one of my great ones. That was a little mow strip, right?
yeah,
Long, narrow, and half of it is owned by the county as part of the flood control
as
project.
far as flood control. Okay.
See this wide strip, but it's not very wide, and half of it is owned by the county. So we couldn't really do anything there, and that's why we probably didn't have houses on it and whatnot. But it was during the drought that we didn't want to put any water on the turf, so the turf went really brown. And I thought, well, we got to convert this to something, and it goes back to that history of reading old books, La Carpinteria or others, where the valley used to be nothing but an oak grove. People
Mhm.
used to tie ribbons on the branches so they could find their way back. Of course, that would be taken out for agriculture, taken out for wood and whatnot. But I thought, well, it would be nice to have a little legacy oak grove back that sort of emulates that old time feel. And so I put 50 trees in there. And if you go down there now, you'll see there's 50 nice oak trees. They're starting to look good. The vision was it would be an overhead canopy of oak trees. And uh, we just love the coastal view. I had the dubious distinction of more than twice getting pitchforks for planting too many trees. And I thought, as a parks director, that's not, I shouldn't be ashamed of that. I should be, so
Frame them, put it on your wall.
I'm just saying, darn, I hated pitchforks. I got a few, but I thought, no, this one actually is a blessing in disguise, because I'm proud to stand in front of the community and said, yes, I planted too many trees.
Absolutely. It does get in the way of frisbee or soccer games, but you work around them. But yeah, having a canopy and having some shade, that's
Well, and if
some
you go
natural
out there
shade.
and really study it, you'll see they were planted in a way that allows a trail to go through the middle of them toward the Franklin Trail. And
Yep.
that was in the plan for the Franklin Trail, actually considered where the trailhead is.
Yeah.
On Sterling, and it was kind of they didn't want people to really park a lot of cars on Sterling, but they felt that we needed to have a public parking area that was available. And as long as the school district cooperates, it's not a problem, because people tend to park more at the high school. But
Right.
yeah, one project that we haven't talked about that I think is important that I'd like to share is the
Please.
boathouse at Ash Avenue,
Yeah.
because that was a little bit smaller than I had envisioned. Um, it was done simultaneously when we were building the marsh park, and the folks that were trying to protect the marsh didn't like the idea of a building footprint anywhere in there. It was always agreed that a bathroom was necessary for the beach, but I really, really wanted a boathouse for the Carpentry kids to be able to get some information or some experience with boats. And I think it ties back to the Shumash heritage, where I used to use the mantra down there with the boathouse crew. Unlike Santa Barbara, we don't need no stinking harbor to be boatmen. And uh,
We have a reef. We don't need a harbor.
yeah, and I grew up with that. Every time I would come up in the summer, I would be offshore in my little rowboat, and I just had a passion for it. Even today, I still boat and still go to the islands, uh, and I just thought this is a great recreation program for our kids. And when we built the boathouse, we were able to get grants from the state to teach boating lessons, and so all that kayaking programming that we offer for free down there, or we used to anyway, was funded in part through a grant from Department of Boating and Waterways.
Mm,
The Department of Boating and Waterways gets money when they sell gas, and they recognize it goes into boats at gas stations and is not being burnt on the highways. They
mhm,
carve out all of that money and do something for boating safety and boating improvement. And
mm.
so I think that's a real cool program. And boy, I don't know how many thousands of kids have had their first experience offshore from that beach, which is a Carpinteria heritage, because we all know the Shumash were some of the original Carpinteria boaters.
Yeah. And that's actually really interesting when we just keep thinking about open space, the use of open space in carpentry and the benefits of it. Um, it's a logical extension to say that the beach and the ocean are part of that open space that we have access to, and the ocean is accessible when you're on a boat. Otherwise, it's just the beach. If you're on a kayak or some other kind of boat, then the ocean is accessible. You can explore the reef. You can explore, the everything out there, and that's has many of the same benefits of other undeveloped open space, whether it's the bluffs or the salt marsh. It's understanding nature and being outside and enjoying it.
Oh, I've boy, I've been in a lot of places on the water. I just got back from the Baltic Sea, and you don't see more diverse sea life anywhere than here. I mean, we have
Yeah.
dolphins and pelicans and all sorts of seabirds. We know the Audubon count as more diverse species. A lot of them are because of the marine birds, and we see migrating whales, and we have the harbor seals, and we have sea lions, and it just goes on and on. We get all those bat ray stings. Well, that's because the ocean is alive. But it is true. You go out there just a couple hundred yards and look back, and you realize, wow, look at this. Look at this vista. Look at the mountains. Look how close they are. How unique this place is, and that perspective is profound. Um, but
It
it's not,
really is.
doesn't have to
It,
be.
it
Can't be afraid, or I guess you can a little bit. But
a little bit's okay. A little bit's okay.
we
Um,
had a motorboat for a while early, and we would take folks out to snorkel. We had a little snorkeling program, and that was pretty good. And one time I was on the boat and took a couple moms with the kids, and had a couple snorkelers instructors out. And a lot of times you'd hold the kid while you convince them to put their face down and see the bottom of the reef. And the reef breaks a few times; it shoals a bit. They're never very powerful waves in the summer, but this wave came up and it peaked and it broke right in front of us and then went right under the boat. And the mom looked at me with these big wide eyes, and I said, "Oh, that happens all the time. Don't worry about it."
it does.
I took Dave Derflinger out once on the boat, and we were putting buoys out. And I just said, "Why don't you come and do this with me? It's fun." And it was when we were going to put buoys outside the harbor seal rookery, and so these were winter buoys, and we had much bigger ground tackle or anchors and chains to hold them in place in the winter environment. But there was a 10-foot break that day, and we were putting the buoy in, and the wave broke out beyond us, and there was a way out. And so I just casually, it wasn't a big deal to me. I've been doing this my whole life. And I think Dave remembers that really well that day. He remarked a couple times. He thought I was nuts, but I was no. I know what I'm doing.
Oh God. So that's a funny story. Um, so now just looking back on your experiences in carpentry, both personally and professionally, is there a particular moment or event that you think kind of captures the essence of our town?
Well, I think one of my fond memories, even though I often was like I had done it enough, but it was the Fourth of July parade where I would drive the tractor down the Linden Avenue, and all the junior lifeguards were there, and that was just a fun time. I just really thought the whole town was there. As we all, you've heard it before, half the town is in it, the other half the town comes to watch it, and those are really somehow those just strike the most fondest memories in my recollections. There are more profound moments about when we got a city council decision, or when we uh, um, I was always proud of what we did on the beach. I think at one point we were listed as the cleanest beach in California, because we made it a point to pick up every cigarette butt and then scold those who dropped them. but
Yep.
but somehow those little parade moments are the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, everything else is how. The parade moment is sort of a why. It's
Yeah.
why you go to all that work. It's kind of the one of the results.
We thought it'd
That,
be, that parade used to be right at twilight, and they stopped doing that, of course. But one time I thought, okay, what we'll do is we'll give everybody a helium balloon and a cheap flashlight, and then if we go down the street, they'll just shine the flashlight into the balloon. And so we passed out like 100 helium balloons to the kids. By the time the parade started, I think we had 20 balloons left. Yeah, that didn't work. Okay, come up with something next year.
I love it. Let's see. So, what else? Is there something else, anything else you want to share with our viewers that we haven't touched on? There's again, the topic of open space and carpentry is just a huge topic, and we just touched on a few aspects.
Well, the old parks director in me, the old community member in me, the wanting to have a vision still for the community. I really hope that we can find a way to preserve more of the coastal open space that's out there. That will never ever, that opportunity once gone is gone forever, and it never gets clawed back. Almost never.
Yeah.
I guess we took great pride in the marsh because some of that property was clawed back. It was actually marsh wetlands that had been filled with dirt, we think partially from the highway project when it went through that long ago. And it was zoned for condominiums. And that was clawed back. And they dug out the dirt that was filled and made the marsh happen again. But otherwise, I think with the Chevron property, Bluffs One, boy, I really would love to see that because those geographical barriers between being urbanized and open space, well, that will be the small town charm that Carpentry covets so much. It'll be that we have open space all around us, and we have that opportunity. It's set up there, and it's not just any open space. Oh my God, it's got the backdrop of the Channel Islands National Park, the Channel Islands. That open space has, you can watch gray whales migrate. You can watch, there's just so many visual and environmental resources that you can immerse yourself in right here in this. It's just fascinating to me. And I also think that the little downtown needs to have all of its economic cylinders firing in order to afford what the community wants. As our demographics shift to older folks, we have more and more retired people coming in. They're the ones that can afford these houses that can up to incredible heights. And the mix, good example, I love it, is there's more tennis players and now there's more pickleball players. I don't know what comes after pickleball, but and all the years I was in the city business, very rarely, I don't ever remember when we had all the money we needed to provide all the services we wanted to, or had the capability to do it. And how do you do that? The economics of the downtown were much better in the 70s than they are now, in my opinion. And so I just think we need to realize that the downtown should be an economic engine. So, what better than tourism paying for the local needs and services? But at the same time, I will say that if that economic engine is firing and doing what it needs to do to generate the revenues the city needs, because I don't think there's any more tax increases they can come up with, maybe, but if the base of your tax base is not high enough, no matter how high your tax is, it's not going to be enough. That's what we're suffering for. And we're a victim. I'm on the water board forever, and we often are the victim of the outside agencies charging us more, and we really have our hands tied. We can't help it if the Central Coast Water Agency has higher costs and they want us to pay our share. So it's always driving our budgets. But boy, if we have a good downtown and it's running right, doesn't have to grow, it just needs to be working, then we have the opportunity to maybe put some money into that open space acquisition, maybe be in a stronger position to take more property off the tax roll, maybe be in a stronger position to argue what our small town really means, which is, in my view, not about the vacancies in the downtown. That's not a small town charm. What it is about the benefit of our expansive open space on our perimeters.
Yeah, and you mentioned taking property off the tax rolls. That's what we as Carpinteria chose to do, buying the Carpinteria Bluffs and preserving the Carpinteria Salt Marsh. We chose to take this off the tax rolls because of the benefit of those areas to us. And then a few years ago, we chose to, not a direct mapping, but we chose to tax ourselves with Measure X sales tax increase because we recognize that things have to be paid for. And so it's Carpinterians collectively seem very mature and very clear that things need to be paid for. We want nice things like the bluffs and our parks and our services and our Carpenter Salt Marsh Nature Preserve, and we know that that has a cost to it. And so
Yeah.
I was really impressed when we passed that sales tax.
That and I guess they've raised the TOT a couple times now, which is the bed tax.
Yeah,
Um, it does remind me. I talk about clawing back on the marsh. Do you remember the end of Baylord Avenue? How it used to be?
sure.
So that was in a way that was another clawback because at some point the city or the county spent money to build Baylord Avenue, and the acknowledgement marker out there that the Citizens for the Bluffs did. That used to be at the very edge of pavement of Baylord Avenue, and it was all that infrastructure. The sidewalks were cracked and broken. The asphalt was alligatored. The Cobra head streetlights, that very icon of urbanization.
Yep.
They were down there. There was a manhole for the sewer district right there because they had a sewer main that ran down to the railroad tracks, already in the property, all ready to accommodate the development that was coming. And I, again, am proud to say I'm the guy that came up with the project to rip all that out. So,
If it's in there, it needs to be maintained. And so if we're saying in perpetuity it's not going to be needed, then rip it out and don't maintain it.
right, and we decided I got a grant from the Coastal Conservancy. No, it wasn't from the Coastal Conservancy. It was a state grant, but and I proposed that we rip out the street and put the parking lot parallel to Carp Avenue as opposed to perpendicular, and lower it so that you wouldn't see it from the street, and put it in a way that you wouldn't see it from the nature preserve, and that's what you see there today. So,
Or don't see.
well, yeah, when I was involved, we were looking at a design for Rincon Preserve, and one of the things that came up is it's too well hidden. There's too much, people go down there and break windows.
Yeah.
Maybe this one will make it a little easier for the sheriff guys to see the cars. So
Yeah.
The visual surveillance is often a good security measure.
Exactly. Well, let's see. We're running out of time here. So let me ask you one last question. And that is if tonight at a sunset, you are told you need to get out of the house and go somewhere and just enjoy one of the parks or natural spaces, where are you going to go?
I'm going to take a walk on the beach. There's always the potential to see something profound there. Even I get joy in just watching a small wave break, or I love to watch pelicans fly by. I think that's just one of the greatest things. And always love to find a shell.
Yeah.
I generally leave it, but I love to just watch what I'm walking on and see, and it changes every day. I was involved in the winter protection berm for some 30 years, over 30 years, and we used to have to survey it for permit purposes. What are we doing, and how much is this and that, and quantify everything. And I used to think, I'm going to measure it today, but just by tomorrow's natural processes with the high and low tides, it's all changed. So whatever I measure, it doesn't matter because it's going to be different tomorrow. And so I just love the beach, and the air. In fact, I want to finish with that. Maybe is I think that's one of the big benefits of our park system and our open space and the air that we get from the Pacific Ocean is it's probably the healthiest ingredient to life that there is.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, Matt, thanks for sharing your memories and your thoughts today. It was a fun conversation, and I'm so glad that we have this recorded so others can learn some of this history and get kind of thinking about some of these ideas and recognizing when they look around that these parks and open spaces are not by accident. They were by choice. They were through hard work. The little pocket parks, little neighborhood parks, as well as the Salt Marsh and the Bluffs Nature Preserve. They're all conscious choices of people in this town before us, and maintaining them will be conscious choices by people who follow us. So I hope that's something people learn.
This is only part one of a 27-part series, Larry told me. So.
Of course. All right. Thanks, Matt. Look forward to talking to you next time about whatever the next part in our series is.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
All right.